Hello, everyone. Sorry for this nice inception effect. I will switch to the exercise, and this session will be, I would say, triple hard mode. Like first one, because it's really late, we're a bit behind of the schedule, and normally I'm sleeping at this time. I don't code. Second one is just like Daniel, I was lucky enough to caught COVID 2 days ago. So I also have a COVID brain fog right now. And in addition to all of that, there were some issues with authenticating to 8-base, so triple hard mode right now. And I mean, but good thing is if I'm able to code this now in this triple hard mode, anyone will be able to do the same. So let's start, not waste the time. Let's go with downloading and installing our dependencies. And we will just simply following the Vue Apollo docs here. So we start with downloading GraphQL tag and Apollo Client. Here we go. And let's copy paste our settings here. So while it's installing, I will be adding things on top of that and quickly fixing. And if my code size is not enough, I believe that there will be someone telling me that code size is too small. So we have Apollo Client core here. And let's remove all the comments and place a correct link here. So here you usually provide the URL for your GraphQL API. In our particular case, it's on the 8-base and it's here. I will just copy the endpoint and put it on my URL and hope that this is going to work. Sorry for that. Cache implementation is untouched, should be fine. And we are creating a new Apollo client with a link. So right now we do have the client and we can even make the first query without Vue Apollo putting. So I probably will make a very quick check to see if my client is working. So Apollo client query, and we need to provide some query here. And in your 8-base, as you probably have noticed, there's an API Explorer. And again, to save some time, I've been watching what Sebastian was doing and created a query. You can see that there is a little difference here. There is a name. When you work with Apollo client, it's quite important to give query names because this will be the key. You can see them in Apollo DevTools. I will just copy paste the query. The color contrast here could be a bit better, honestly. So let's just take this one, put it in our client. For now, I will be using GQL tag. And GQL is just a templater that you can use to convert your queries from the string. Let's put the query here, and it's like port list. Everything is cool, besides indentation. And let's see if our client is fine with this little query. Here's our app. Let's open the console and see if there is any errors. Nope, there is no errors. And there is this response you can see here that contains all of our data. However, there is a problem. This data is not connected with our Vue application. Neither it's like reactively shown on the app, not in the component, not its rendering. It's like, okay, we need to connect it to Vue app now. So I can remove all these cool things here and close my terminal for now. And let's continue with the installation. So there are next steps, and we will go with the composition API. So we will need to install Apollo Composable. Here we go. And now we add a few more things in our main TS. First of all, it would be default Apollo client, and I just need to replace my stuff in the app with this code, and I will explain it briefly. So instead of just rendering the app component, we also need to provide Apollo Client, and we need to also import provide and our H from Vue. Here we go. Why it's complaining about, oh, of course. Thank you, Linter. And we're using router, we use Pinia. Everything should be okay at this point. Let's go and see. No, it's not. Oh yeah, H2. Where I made it H2, though, main TS. Whoa, really? This is the point where, like, I'm sorry, what? Okay, I will even copy paste it again, but normally it should just work. Oh yeah, it's for Vue too. Oh my God. That's what I call COVID. Brain fog. Okay. Good. Good. H is imported now. Application is working. There is no request, but we are good because we have Apollo working right now. And there is one more thing I would like to add here, because you've seen that I've been using GQL for making the query. But what if I want to store my queries in dedicated GraphQL or GQL files and just use them, importing them into the Vue components? We can do it. Normally, if you were using Webpack, you had a specific Webpack loader called GraphQL tag loader. But for Vite, we can use a rollup plugin. So I'm going to just jump on rollup plugin and install one more thing. So here goes rollup plugin, and let's follow its documentation too. So we would need to add these to plugins in our Vite config.js. So we have this one, and I also want to add GraphQL one. And I need to import it from the rollup plugin. Okay, did we break anything? Nope, we didn't. Still works. And now I can create my query somewhere in the GraphQL folder. Well, we can create one more folder, call it queries. And here in the queries, we can start with our first request. And first request will be boards. So let's call it boards query GQL. Why query GQL? This is not a specific naming convention, but I find it more readable to just have two extensions, where the second one specifies if it's query, mutation, subscription, something else, and GQL or GraphQL is just normally telling our application that this is a GraphQL file. So let's go and copy paste our query from API Explorer to here. And as you can see, it's highlighted because I have Apollo tools for VS Code. It provides us with a highlighting, and if we download the GraphQL schema, it also allows us to use auto-completion and everything. But for now, the most important thing is that I have a GraphQL file and I have a query. And I can start using it in my index. Let's quickly check our task. So installed, yep, did it. Replace hard-coded boards with data from 8-bytes board table. Okay, so we're in the right place. And let's import our query here. So import boards query from what it is for us. Okay, like this. And it's not on the boards too, it's in the GraphQL queries. And you can see that there is no auto-completion, boards, query, GQL. And of course, there will be TypeScript complaining about this one. The import is still working already, but TypeScript is complaining about this. So we will need one more hack if you're using TypeScript in your project. Let's create GraphQL DTS here. And here is a cheat. I have a snippet already created for this one because I don't use TypeScript in my everyday life. So I needed to prepare for this one. So now we have a type definition. Let's go to our TS config and say that we have files, right? And in files, we get our GraphQL DTS. And we would need to also include this to our includes. So we have this for Vue. Right now, I want to add the same rule for GQL. See, it stopped complaining. Now we have board query imported. And maybe we can make it simpler, like alias here. And now we can finally work with boards. So instead of having this hard-coded data, let's query the API. Well, I just leave it here for now. I'm too fast. So let's start with returning the result from the query. We will use query, and this is the composable that is provided by Vue Apollo Composables that allows us to, well, send query to the GraphQL API. And the first parameter here, you can see that's document any. Sounds very cryptic. Document here is your GraphQL query. In this particular case, it also means it's parsed document. So you should either import it from GraphQL file or use GQL templater to translate a string to the document. Boards query, go here. And we can go back to our app, fresh, nothing is broken, network, there is some request here. We can see the response, boards list. And let's close it, open where are my Vue DevTools. Okay, here we go. So in our application right now, the drawer, the alerts, and the drawer, whatever. Let's just try to locate this component to see the result. So you can see that there is some result that contains boards list, that contains items, and there are like our two boards here. So we need to create a computed property to get only items from it. So now const boards is just a computed that returns our result, boards, so what it is, result boards list items. List items should be okay. I'm just checking if I'm not missing anything, and let's just make it if we have a result, if we have a boards list in the result, and if we have items, or an empty array. List of type ref any, whatever. And I just need to remove my boards from here. Okay, do it work or do you complain? Boards, okay, let's see. Boards is array of 0. Y, I want the Y. Result is here. Okay, let's remove this one and see why you're failing. Okay. Reading items. Okay, so boards list is undefined. Is it board list or boards list? Give me my boards back. No, it's boards list. Should okay, yeah, because it's value. Ref boards list items. Cool. Now we have, well, interesting boards. One with a name, one without, but at least we have boards having, we fetch them from the API success. Considering the fact of COVID and late night coding, already something. Okay, now let's also have some loading state because we're fetching data from the API. So I assume we need to show some kind of loading indicator. If you have a classic approach, REST API access something, you normally create a loading flag or create a dedicated composable to have a loading. We are lucky we're using composables from Apollo, and we have loading state exposed from this API. So let's display it somewhere here. Do we have a component for the loading? No, it doesn't look like we have a loader, so I will just put some here and say loading. And if we have loading, we show loading. Okay, do your work. It's like so fast in terms of loading. Yeah, of course, at some point we have an undefined and we're reading board list out of it. And instead of putting my conditional chaining on result, I should put it actually on the value. And there is some loading, it's just very brief. You can see that blinking over here. And we display boards when we have boards. So we can move this a bit out from this div and say that when we have boards, we display boards. But for now, I'm thinking like, okay, we are fine with loading state being here. Also, there is one more thing that we probably should handle. Like, what do we do if our query fails? We have alerts here, I can see it. So maybe if we, like, what is happening on error in this particular case? There's a callback, and we should say that alerts. I have no idea what alerts have because I didn't watch the Eduardo talk, but I assume that there is some error. And we can pass some message probably saying like error loading boards. Let's try to make our query fail. Like let's say that not ID, but ID 1, 2, 3, and oh, see error loading boards. Now we have error handling. That's what I call proper API call. Okay, we have at least one query. And now we can probably go to the next task. So what did we do? Yes, this is done. This is done too. Use mutation to create a new board. Cool. What do we have for mutation to create a new board? We have board create. That returns us a board, amazing. And requires some complicated data to pass. But the only required part is actually a title. So we can try to create a new board with only a title and see how this works. So let's just start writing the mutation here. We will call it create board. And in our mutation, it's called, let's see. There's so much data on this board that is not related to board create. We need to pass our input. That will be data. And in our data, we need to pass title. For the sake of simplicity, I will just pass the title back here, and we want to return our board back. and ID, title, and image, just the same set of data. Yep, because it requires me to have normal code. Cool. I'll just quickly run it here to see if my mutation fails. No, it actually created me a proper board. Copy paste everything. Like if you work with GraphQL Explorer, always try to run your query or mutation first on the GraphQL Explorer, and only after that bring it to your application. Because if you just try the query here, especially without auto-completion, if you don't have your schema fetched, most of the times you will probably fail. So let's create new folder. Here, call it mutations. And here will be a new file called create board mutation GQL. But there is but. We don't want to hard code the title. We want to pass title from our index view. When you need to pass any variables to the mutation, you would say that we want to pass. Probably it would be better to create an input here, like we need to pass data, and you need to specify a GraphQL type in this particular case. In our case, this is called board create input. And here, instead of hard coding anything, we just pass this data. Because I will only specify the title, but maybe people who will be working after me want also to pass some order, maybe some other data for the mutation, and I just need to respect that. And we can also create a fragment here, because you can see that this part and this part are very similar. So again, like folder, there are fragments, and we can create board fragment GQL. That will be fragment board on board. This is a name of the fragment we will be using it under. I can name it whatever. I can name it Natalia and use it on my queries, but this is an actual GraphQL type. And when you create a fragment, you need to ensure that this type exists. Board is here, so yeah, it exists. And I just put all my little parts of shared properties right here to the fragment. Oops, I didn't copy paste it. What is happening? Why it's not? Like even my keyboard right now is failing me. Okay, we have fragment here. And in our query and mutation, we can do the import, just like we do on simple JS file. So import board fragment from in this case, it would be just board. I can fail right now, but I just feel the need to show this to you. Just working with GraphQL without fragments is fairly painful. Don't need from, I think, which can just import like this in the GraphQL. And here we just have our board. Okay, let's see if we fail. If we fail, we just revert it. Yeah, because it's in fragments. Now you're okay, now you're okay. And we can do the same in our mutation. And instead of having it here, we will just return board. Okay, now we can go back to our file and start using the mutation here. So we call the function create board, and right now it's just our success board created. Instead, we will need to use a mutation. And we will use mutation composable here. And it returns the mutate method that we will be able to call in the API. Let's give it an alias of create board or something like this. So we don't use this function anymore. And use mutation is imported, but use mutation also requires a document. Like if we check use mutation here, you can see an argument for document was not provided. So just like we imported board's query, let's import our mutation. Create board mutation from, again, GraphQL, mutations, create board, mutation, GQL. And we go with create board mutation, please. So right now we have our method, but we also need to pass something to the create board, because if I try to call it right now from our template, here I lack the parameters that I need to pass down to the mutation. So what do we need to do here? Let's see. We will need to pass some kind of a new board. Let's create some absolutely static data here, like placeholder, const new board. Even not a new board, but new board payload, I guess. So what does our mutation expect here? It expects some data variable that we need to pass as a parameter. And there should be some title, test board in our particular case. And now we will need to try to pass this property to our create board. We don't even need it to be reactive for now, just some static part. Let's try. I assume we're going to fail miserably right now, but we will need to check. Okay, there is my new board. Oh, cool. What? I don't have permission to perform this operation, people. The database is rejecting me at this stage, it seems. So what's in the network? So we actually tried, and you can see that we passed a variable that was a correct variable with a title test board, and we have errors. You don't have permission to perform this operation, so I am sorry, I don't think I can finish this part because I'm not allowed to modify the boards list in the database. But the good thing is we didn't fail with the actual parameter that we passed to the board. No, this is this is actually the error from the database.
Hey, Natalia, try it one more time. I just
You think it will work? Okay.
I just updated a setting there.
Okay. Now you can see that we created a board and that test board, but it didn't appear in our API. Let's try to refresh and see if it appears now. It is, but it's a problem, right? Because we just want our UI to be as responsive as possible. So what do we do with this? Two ways. Bad way and good way. Bad way for you is just to refetch data. It's like what most of the people try to do with GraphQL API. Like we created a new board and we just refetch the whole list. It does make sense sometimes. if you have a paginated sorted list and you remove something from it, add something to it, you really want to synchronize with your backend. You really want to get your page sorted and correct. But in our case, we don't have data paginated as for now, and we simply want to add this board to our list. What is a good thing about our query? Whatever you fetched right now is stored in the cache. How do we know this? Let's refresh the page. There is a request. We go to this part, neural, go. Oh, it just refreshes the page for me. Okay, no, it doesn't. So I go here, I go back to boards. Is this link even working? I guess not. Okay, I was going to show how nicely it works when I go back in the root, but you can see even if I'm using a back part, there is no more additional request to the API because the data is already stored in the Apollo cache. And it's just like Pinia. You can see, you can go here. This is Apollo DevTools for Chrome. And our root query is here. There is boards list, and there is some data that we store in our cache right now. But whenever I add a new board, there is a mutation, but there is nothing that shows in our cache. And this is a problem. Now let's try to make a cache update after mutation, and we will be done with it because I think we're taking too much time. And we definitely won't be able to finish all the tasks. So when we use the mutation, we can also leverage the mutation update hook. I will go to the documentation to just make sure that I put my update hook in a correct place. Updating, making all other cache updates, updating the cache after mutation. Blah, blah, blah. So I run the mutation, and I can also have an update in the parameters. So let's just have a callback in our mutation. Like I'm just an unlucky one. I still use Vue Apollo with Vue 2, so there is no composables for me. So what do we have here? We have an object we return, and we have an update function. So the first parameter in update is actually our Apollo cache that we can access right here. And second is the data that not even like this, it's a response. So we have data. Data that we get from the API. And just for now, let's console log this data to see what do we have as a response. We're not updating anything, we're just creating a new board. And for the new board, let's test board 2. Fun. Console, new board. And we have board create. And inside of it, we have a new board, like these 3 properties with a type name board. So back to the mutation. Now we can say that we want to update the query of boards with the new data. And we will go with cache update query. What query do we want to update? Boards query. And again, let's check the docs for the correct signature. So there is query and there is a callback with data. Data here is what we have in the cache. So for this, let's call board create. And here we can say that not data, but let's call it something like res And we want to return a new data for this query. Let's check again how it looks. Boards list. So boards list items, and our items should be, so that will be the rest of the boards query. So res boards list items and a new board create that we put here. Again, probably this is going to fail because it's too late and I'm not sure, I'm not completely sure what I'm doing right now, but let's see how it goes. Refresh the page. Test board 2, new board. Wow, look at this, it didn't fail. There is some problem that we have cache data may be lost when replace the board list field of a query object because all of them have an idea. We would need to define a custom merge function for this particular case. We won't go that deep. The main idea is, okay, this is working. Didn't even expect this to work from the first try. And I think we will stop at this point to give some time for the next session. We're already too late. But right now you have an idea how to make a query, how to make a mutation. So this part shouldn't be as problematic because you have hard-coded single board, just a query that you have with a parameter. Use mutation to delete board, very similar to create board. And update board is more interesting one because you wouldn't need an update function. If you have an ID in your request, Apollo should be smart enough to update the board automatically. But rest should be fine. And I will just need to commit my changes to add Apollo requests. Okay, I'm stopping for now.
Oh, sorry, I am muted. Thank you so much, Natalia, for such an amazing session, first of all. And really great thanks because you are sick and you still managed to put time for us. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also for staying up this late. It's so for the audience also. So it's like around 11 now here in Netherlands, and Natalia is joining us so late. So thank you. We really appreciate you. Huge shout out to you. And there are a few questions which we would like to take. Okay, let me check. So, okay. So there is this question which is like. The person says that it's maybe an advanced question about Apollo. If we use a repository pattern in a data-driven project, is it possible to do a query per entity?
I'm not sure what exactly is a data-driven project in this particular case, so I can't answer without seeing the schema.
Okay, sure, no issue. So yeah, definitely, we understood that this might be a little confusing question.
Too specific, I would say.
Yeah, very specific. Yeah, so it's very specific. So I think definitely we need to know more to answer any specific question. Okay, so someone wants to know that for someone coming from a background with REST API, what's the biggest mind shift you have to make while working with GraphQL?
I think the biggest mind shift that you would need to make is you don't need all the data you fetch with REST API. I like to use an example about GitHub. When you have a REST API on GitHub and you want to fetch a list of repositories and let's say a language for every single repository, something that you see on the GitHub page quite often, I believe. You make the first request. You have a list of repositories and every repository is like 200 fields. And you think, I only need one, a language. And you think you have it? No, you have a link to the language. So for all the repositories list, you would need to make a second request per repository. We have one request for the list and n requests for every single repository to get the data about the language. While in GraphQL, it would be one query with one field per repository. You only fetch the data you need. This is the biggest shift you would need to make.
Yes, yes, that's amazing. And that's also one of the biggest advantage which we get when we are using GraphQL. Thank you so much. And but when we started, I did mention that you have some great recommendation for best coffee. So yeah, would you like to share it with the audience? What's the best place to get best coffee in the world?
In the world, it will be Melbourne. Like, if you want amazing coffee, go to Melbourne. I didn't believe it myself until I was in Melbourne. Like, Melbourne is the coffee capital of the world. Like, what? No, it is. It really is. If you never have been there, totally recommend it.
Yes, that's definitely on my list right now, and I'm sure if someone is joining us from Melbourne, they can definitely confirm that in the chat. Everybody else, we need to go to Melbourne maybe to taste that coffee. Thank you. Thank you so much once again, Natalia. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's amazing.